Greetings, my brothers in humanity. This is Clinton from Born Today, and I thought we'd discuss a bit the hot topic of the day, which I see all over the media. South African refugees landed in the USA. So what exactly is going on in South Africa? Well, to first get into the story, you need to understand that everybody in South Africa has different political views. Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief history of my own experiences in South Africa as a mixed race person who was born during close to the end of apartheid, and then you can determine for yourself what you think of my view. So first I'm going to give you my background to be completely honest, so you understand my political views a bit better before we get into this subject. So I was born in the 1980s in South Africa, and this was around the end of apartheid, and I've experienced many things in my life. I grew up extremely poor. We used to live in a broken down car, in the back of a car, me, my brother and my sister and my mom. If you can imagine this, right? Think of I think in the USA you'd call it a truck, but in South Africa we'd call it a bakkie. So a broken down, small little truck, and we used to sleep in the back of that, and that was our home for a little bit. Eventually our life situation improved, our living circumstances, and we had a lovely home. When I was about 13, we left a very impoverished community to move to a middle-class white suburb called Kraaifontein, which is in the northern suburbs. And I also entered a formerly white-only school, and I engaged with a lot of white people. Now, when I was growing up, our impoverished community was right next to a informal settlement where many black people lived. Unfortunately, very impoverished black people as well. And there used to be a lot of tension between our two communities because back in apartheid days, the colored people in South Africa, our ethnic group is called colored people. It includes, for instance, Griquas. Like, my name is Clinton Barnes. The Barnes family has a long history in South Africa, okay, as Griquas. But today we're just called colored people or Cape Coloreds. That is what we normally are classified as, right? And so in South Africa, we were the buffer between the black people and the white people, right? The brown barrier, if you will. And sometimes the Asians as well, who lived in South Africa, they would get classified as colored people, and because they weren't white, they weren't black, they just get put in with the rest of us. And that is how we were divided in South Africa. And eventually, as apartheid came to an end, that barrier slowly eroded a little bit. We still have little isolated communities, mainly due to economic circumstances. So we're segregated by economic status now. And that's basically early life in South Africa, my growing up. Then when I entered a whites-only school, there was a lot of issues that we had as non-white people, because obviously it's kids, and kids have issues with each other, and if something is a bit different, right, they look at you, you're brown, they're white. And it's even common amongst white people in South Africa, a little bit of prejudice, right, where the white English people will have issues with the white Afrikaans people. And so there was a lot of dividing on group lines and racial lines. But over time that actually became not as pronounced in society, right? So people would gravitate more towards what they believe. And so eventually we get to this point now in South Africa, right? Where the ANC gains power and they become the government in South Africa, the ruling government, getting over 60%, I believe, of the vote in the first elections in 1994. And so many things changed in South Africa, right? The Europeans and the Western people came over, they saw how South Africa was, and they saw a facade, right? A lie. The lie was we are a happy, multicultural society, and we were all getting along. But there were many groups that had issues with each other, right? This isn't just a racial issue, it's an ethnic issue in South Africa. Different groups, for instance, of the black majority, there's about 80 to 90% of South Africa is black African, right? but this is different ethnic groups and it's different tribal groups. And there's animosity that people have towards each other. For instance, if you're one of the Nguni tribes people, which is the Zulu, the Swazi, the Xhosa, and the, goodness, I don't want to say something wrong here. So it's the Zulu, the Swazi, the Xhosa, and then it's also the group that fled to Zimbabwe because they were being persecuted by the Zulus. So I don't want to, I can't get to the name now, but I'm not going to get into that. So there's 4 black ethnic groups, 4 different tribes, which form the Nguni people. And then there's different tribes of people, the Basotho, and all these other groups, right? And so it's not one unified black African group, right? It's different racial and ethnic groups, even in that 90%, and they've got major issues with each other. And obviously, South Africa has a high rate of poverty among these previously disadvantaged people, or the especially the black youth, and it also has a lot of opportunities. And so many African immigrants came over to South Africa looking for jobs, and they looked for improving their lives. So they came over to South Africa, and so there was a lot of conflict, which led to what we call the xenophobic attacks, right? Which is sporadic attacks that happen throughout the years, where the local or native population of black African groups who are impoverished, they need jobs, they need to improve their social and the economic statuses. They saw other groups coming over, and those groups were doing well, and so they were angered, okay, because their livelihoods, their living standards and everything, that was being thrown under the bus. And this is largely due to the racial laws which were put in place. For instance, we have the Equity Act in South Africa, which is a race-based affirmative action law. So for instance, in South Africa, we have different racial groups, as we went over. And when it comes to jobs, we have racial quotas that need to be filled, okay? But the funny part about this is, a mixed race person like myself, I would be discriminated against, right? So these laws would favor, for instance, black Africans. And this is where a lot of these issues start, with these xenophobic attacks, because a black African person from a different country can come over and they'll take advantage of that, right? Which is fair enough. They're taking advantage, they're improving their lives. And this is discriminatory against the minorities in South Africa, racial minorities. And obviously, if you're a black African person, you would have an issue with somebody else benefiting from a system which is meant to benefit the previously disadvantaged African and black people. And this led to the xenophobic attacks, okay? And a way that they try to unify all these different ethnic black groups is through black nationalism, okay, or Pan-Africanism. But that also doesn't work, because even if you try to rally people behind their racial group, it still doesn't solve the issues of poverty, unemployment, and their low living standard, right? And so this would lead to them obviously attacking new entries or new people coming into the country that was taking away jobs, and that is the issues, right? So it's not one unified 80 to 90% of the population. It is different people with different interests, different backgrounds, different nationalities, and people with a lot of anger towards each other as well, tribally, and with a lot of long histories, right? For instance, goodness, I can't get to this group. So there's 4 Nguni tribes, and the one Nguni tribe was persecuted by the Zulu people, right? They went to Zimbabwe, and then Robert Mugabe, he also went after them, okay? And so now the issue with that is that tribe's people obviously have issues with the rest of the Nguni tribes people. And then for instance, the Zulu people, they mainly don't have an issue ethnically with other groups. They'd have an issue with foreigners coming into the country. This is because the Zulu people have a lot of pride in their history. They are warriors. They were dominant in South Africa before the British took over. Even the Afrikaners, or the, I don't want to say the B word, because the B word could be seen as derogatory, okay? The voortrekkers, the people that migrated when the British started colonizing in South Africa, the Afrikaner groups, right, that used to deal with the Zulus, they had a lot of respect for the Zulus. Even though in their history they had a war and conflict with each other due to being betrayed by a man called, or a chief called Dingaan. And Dingaan made a deal with, for instance, the Voortrekkers to give them some land if they can get some cattle from a different tribe. And they did that. They sat down, and the day that they sat down, unfortunately, Dingaan ordered the slaughter of them. So he betrayed them in the night. They all were supposed to be celebrating, and many people died. After that, it led to the Battle of Bloedrivier, Blood River, where the Afrikaners defeated the Zulu people. So even in that, right, the Zulu people were seen as a dominant force, and the Afrikaners were defending themselves, right? And so to get land or to get anywhere there, they would need to negotiate with that powerful tribe, and that is how Zulu people often see themselves. They're part of this powerful tribe that ruled over South Africa, that all other tribes basically were in fear of. And this is why they have a lot of, their personality is very different. They're not insecure, from the shortest Zulu person that I've met to the biggest, strongest Zulu person that I've met, right? I've never ever in my entire life met a Zulu person that is insecure about his history. But then you get tribes that were beaten down, that had to flee, and they are very angry, right? And this isn't obviously all of them, it's just ingrained in their history. And so they would be more confrontational because they feel the need to defend themselves. And I'm not going to get into which tribe that is, because obviously different tribes, smaller tribes, they would feel this way. One tribe in particular would feel that way, and I won't name them, okay? This is not name and shame. But different racial groups, different tribes. It is not one racial group like a monolith that has issues with the rest of South Africa, right? These are people with diverse opinions. They are mostly good people, and unfortunately the people that got into government, the ANC, they are a former terrorist organization that used to persecute even the black people. So there were many black leaders that tried to improve the living situation of black South Africans, and they would often be assassinated by the ANC, allegedly. And I could name a few figures. For instance, Steve Biko, he was allegedly assassinated by the ANC, and there were different groups as well and different individuals. There was even kids that were burnt alive, okay, with tires around the neck. It's called necklacing, where they would put petrol on them and they would burn them in front of the community if they dissent against the ANC. Even Winnie Mandela is famous. A famous quote goes something like, with my matches and my tire, I will liberate South Africa. And so this is the mindset of a lot of radicals, okay, because they wanted a violent revolution, and a violent communist revolution, because the ANC is a communist party. They had ties with the Soviet Union, and this is ingrained in their political party. It's their mindset, and it's not just their mindset. You must understand, a lot of people that are in key positions in South Africa, from the legislative branch to all of these other branches, even the military, they are former ANC members, or they are current ANC members, and their mindset is that radical communist mindset. So when it came to, for instance, a person by the name of Julius Malema, okay, I'll greet you in a bit, Mamelo, okay? I just want to get through with my thought, and then I'll look at the questions. So this radical communist mindset, okay, it's particularly in the older members of the ANC, and obviously with the more radical, the Youth League and such, right? They are in positions of power. And so when, for instance, Julius Malema, which is a very famous South African now, right, because he's famous around the world for saying something for the past 20 years, which the West should have dealt with 20 years ago, when the ANC were a dominant force in South Africa. Currently, they have just about 40% of the vote in a direct democracy. But Julius Salo Malema, okay, he was a former Youth League leader in the ANC, and his rhetoric caused a lot of issues. His rallies were racist gatherings, okay? And I can openly say that because the vast majority of people in the media fully accept this now, right? that he is a racist, and he also is a black nationalist, a Pan-African, okay? A Pan-Africanist. And his mindset is completely disproven, even amongst the, not disproven, it's completely rejected amongst the youth now, because the last election in South Africa, he lost a lot of votes to the newly Jacob Zuma party. Which one is this called now? I think Mkondo Sizwe. So he, the former president, was impeached for corruption, for his corrupt dealings. He formed a new political party, Mkondo Sizwe, okay, MK. And they are even more radical than the EFF, okay? And there, a lot of the EFF members did join them, and they got about 15% of the vote in South Africa during the last elections in 2024. Okay, so Julius Malema's more radical members went to the third largest party, because the EFF's view of immigration is not accepted by black South Africans for the most part. And so I've went over this view of to the best of my ability, the view that black Africans have of black immigrants coming over and taking jobs. They see them as a threat. And so when Julius was pushing this "we are all black" narrative and this black nationalist thing, they rejected it because it included the black immigrants that were coming to take away their jobs. And jobs is the main issue in South Africa. We have a large unemployment rate amongst the youth. And obviously during the last election, this was a main issue. The grabbing of the land, or the land seizures, that actually lost popularity over the years. And so, for instance, that's a main thing that the ANC was pushing, and the ANC got about 40% of the vote, because I can see the statistics here. The ANC got 40% of the vote during the last elections. The way that the ANC normally gains votes is by threatening to take away the land from the white people. And that strategy has failed because people want jobs. Most people aren't radical psychopaths going to a stadium chanting to kill a certain racial group, okay? It is not the nature of the vast majority of South Africans to be filled with hate and rage towards their fellow in humanity, right? And this is why, unfortunately, the US pushing this refugee thing, and Trump going on stage talking about a genocide of white Afrikaners is not helpful to South Africans, because we were just coming off of that, okay? Just coming off of that racial animosity, that seizing of the land, and all of these issues, right? That was dying out. This has been going on for 30 years almost, as long as I've been alive. This fear-mongering about taking the land away from the white people as a political strategy to gain votes for the ANC, that has been dying down, okay? Now Trump comes along, he talks about genocide and Afrikaners and stuff, and so now many of these black Africans that unfortunately have bad living situations, they are impoverished, they see this, and now this makes them more, what is the word to use here? They see a preferential treatment of a certain racial group in South Africa, and this makes them very angry. And this makes them more likely to join radical black nationalist parties, or to support more radical black national parties like the Mkondo Sizwe or EFF. Okay, so that was dying off, and so now it's reinvigorated, it's re-energized, and this hatred is now lit again. And obviously, completely justified in sanctioning South Africa, because it's been ongoing for 30 years. We have race-based policies that discriminate against minorities. Even me, as a mixed race person, I would be discriminated against with through legislation. I would be denied positions in work, okay, to companies that want to be BE compliant. I would be denied education in some circumstances, so that race quotas can be filled. It is not a merit-based system, it is a race quota affirmative active system. And I believe in the USA they have diversity, equity, and inclusion, something which is very similar to what we call BE, or broad-based, triple BE, broad-based black economic empowerment, okay? And that system is such a corrupt system, because what has happened is the government tenders, okay, these opportunities to win, for instance, government contracts for companies, and they have to be BEE compliant. If they don't adhere to diversity, equity, inclusion, they will be denied government contracts. So it's completely racist, it's completely unfair towards people that are non-blacks. But the biggest problem with this again is the elites within the ANC, their family members benefit from that system. So if you are, for instance, with Jacob Zuma, he has like 20-something children. He's one of the former presidents. He's now the leader of Nkondo Sizwe, the third largest party in South Africa. His family members benefit greatly, okay, from these government contracts. And the only reason why they get it is due to Black Economic Empowerment, the BEE, Affirmative Action Initiative, okay, the legislation that we have. Now, if that was removed and we had to replace it with a system which looked into, for instance, levels of poverty or income levels, it would completely remove the vast majority of the racial animosity that the people have towards each other. But the ruling party doesn't want the people to resolve their racial issues. They depend greatly on the people of South Africa being divided on racial lines. And being a multicultural society, it's very easy to manipulate people because somebody doesn't look like you. Guess what? Let's go after that person. He's in the minority. We want the majority of votes. And so I've seen, for instance, the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, lying about, what can you call this? It's not a genocide. It is more akin to an ethnic cleansing of the Afrikaner population, because the Afrikaner population and white population in general, their population has been going down over the years in South Africa because a lot of them are discriminated against heavily by the government. So imagine somebody in, for instance, institutions of higher learning having a far left view of race. And obviously their racial hierarchy is the people they believe are persecuted the most, and then the people that they believe are advantaged the most. So this is a problem in South Africa because not every white person is rich, okay? So they, for instance, would see a poor black person on the side of this, a poor white person on the side of the street, often as being more advantaged than a rich person or a black person, right? This is the mindset that they have. And so often if you see cases which involved racial discrimination, where a rich black person would be doing something which is racially motivated, right? He would, for instance, mess with a white person of a lower social status, and they would dismiss a case like that sometimes, right? With Julius Malema, when he was chanting about killing the white Afrikaners in the stadium with the members of his party, he was actually taken to court multiple times. Okay? Many organizations in South Africa fully agree what he did was racist. But the problem there is the people in power that have that communist mindsets that were part of the ANC or are still deployees of the ANC in that branch of, in whatever branch they are in, right? For instance, in law, in finance or whatever, right? That ANC deployee has a mindset which is shared by the rest of the ANC, which is they can't discriminate against a white person, because a white person historically in their view is the advantaged group. And so Julius Malema's cases were often dismissed, and he'd make a show of the trial where he'd mock things and he'd make jokes and stuff, so to show that he doesn't take it seriously, because he knows at the end of the day that he will not be held accountable. And now that the USA and the Western countries are catching on to how evil and racist the government has been in South Africa for the past 30 years, it has led to them doubling down on that strategy of gaining votes in the country. Because in a direct democracy, you're constantly trying to get the majority of votes to stay in power. It's that simple. And so what they would do here is they would have their rallies. And obviously, if people are more interested in jobs, they will lose out. The parties like the Democratic Alliance, they would win and they would gain more votes. Even if it's slow, even if they're viewed as a white party, they will slowly gain more votes. But if you play towards people's anger and hatred, or the idea that they aren't the favored group, for instance, a different group, which is an adversarial group to them, is being favored, they will unite on racial lines for a large portion of that racial group. will unite on racial lines, and then they would go vote for a crazy ass party like the Mkondo Sizwe, which is, if you look at if you look at what the plans are for South Africa, it is not logical, it is not reasonable. Neither is the plans of the ANC, right? I think Section 9 of our Constitution states that we're supposed to move towards a non-racial society, but the way that they're trying to get to a non-racial society is using corrective racism. And my thoughts on that is that it's just wild, man. Like, how do you solve racism with more racism? It's completely stupid. And this is unfortunately what they've been doing for all of these years, okay? And meanwhile, these corrupt elites in government have been enriching the family to a severe degree. A lot of times, our tax money goes missing in South Africa, and the people wonder, hey man, where did the tax money go? And the next thing that they do is you'll see a rally, oh no, the evil white person, right? What kind of deflection is that? The majority of South Africans at this point are wise to it. But with what the US has done now, by feeding into the lie of a white genocide, it's not going to play out well in South Africa, okay? Because there is no white genocide. The white Afrikaner community has been persecuted severely, okay? But it's not a large-scale level of violent persecution. You have different degrees of persecution that white South Africans, particularly Afrikaners, deal with, okay? For instance, you have legislation, which is obviously that it's very broad, a broad, racist, and discriminatory attack on the dignity of white South Africans. But you do obviously get people that go to these rallies where they sing about killing that particular white ethnic group, that get motivated and they go to an isolated farm. And in rare instances, okay, it is not that common as people put it out to be, but in rare instances there would be a brutal attack on people living on isolated farms. And it would be a racially motivated attack. It would be, in the minds of the attackers, a type of extermination of a rodent, okay? And they would chant slogans from the rallies that they've just been at the people that they're persecuting. So clearly it's related. The people attend the rallies, they get incited into committing violence, okay? They go out, they carry out these attacks, they chant what they heard at the rallies. This type of racist programming that has been going on for about 30 years. And unfortunately, due to the low levels of education and low level of engagement that people have with other racial groups and the way that they think, the way that they operate, they are easily dehumanized. And yeah, it's just very sad to see this. So if you guys have any questions, drop questions. I'm just rambling on here, okay? It is quite late in the Philippines right now, and that is where I'm currently living, because I've escaped the violence in South Africa, because South Africa is a very violent country with a lot of crime. And I can say that because we've been victims of crimes for many years. Even my wife is a Filipino that came to live in South Africa for a few years. That is the first time she was mugged, okay? And people took her phone, and it was a very traumatic experience for her. And in Philippines, where they are far poorer than the people that live in South Africa, the way that they treat people is much better than the way that South Africans treat each other, okay? So general view of South Africans, mostly good. But unfortunately, due to tribalism and ethnic, what would you call this? Ethnic prejudices and tribal prejudices that we have, we aren't the friendliest people to each other. And we should really fix that so that we can actually build a better country, because the way that you build a better country is by loving your brother and loving your neighbor. Then you can move forward. If the strategy of the people in power is to motivate their countrymen, their citizens, with hatred to vote for them in a direct democracy, it's going to lead to more racial issues, okay? So legislatively, South Africa is a highly racist country. Personally, individual to individual, people are people, okay? We have preferences that exceed just what we view with our eyes when we look at people and interact with them, okay? It's not just that person is black, that person is white. People are beyond that, okay? Vast majority of people. Some small minority of people, they are psychopaths, okay? They have a level of hatred for their fellow man, which is just wicked. It would make Satan blush, the level of hatred that they have for their fellow man. And that is the minority of people. It is not the majority. People are very diverse, and we are mostly good, okay? I love, for instance, Pope Francis. He said that people are fundamentally good. And this is so true. Because from a Christian point of view, we are made in the image of God. All things that God made is good. And so therefore, we are fundamentally good. But our experiences and our interactions with other people, other beings, that corrupts us over time. So let me read some of my stuff. Mamelo Melody said, hi, greetings Mamelo. I hope I haven't bored you too much with my rant. Don't forget the torture that occurs during the farm attacks, which other crimes in SA as torture too. Well, you'd be surprised, right? Because violence against women is a big issue. And I'm not one of these Me Too people, okay? There is a hatred that some men have for women. And South Africa is a high rape country, okay? I'm not supposed to say that on YouTube, but I don't know any other way to say it. In South Africa, our rape statistics are shocking, okay? And unfortunately, the way that that's done towards women is in a very brutal way. And obviously, I fully agree. There's stories that I've heard because my dad, stepfather, he's a white person. When I was 13, I moved to a majority white suburb, which is mostly Afrikaans. My ethnicity, colored people, we have Dutch ancestry. And when I started engaging with people online, right, many people actually told me to go back to Holland. And I don't know if you've seen the way that I look, right? I don't look like I'm supposed to be in Holland. And because I am a few shades lighter and my hair is a bit different to some black nationalists, they have said I should go to Europe and I should go to Holland, and that is where I belong, okay? And that is shocking, okay? Because I would think I would go to Southeast Asia or something with how my mixed genetics have made me end up looking. And that is actually why I ended up in the Philippines. So yeah, I'm going to read this message. We have the highest rape and murder rate in the world, including war-torn, fully agree, including war-torn countries. That's the shocking stat, yes. And that's why I brought up women, right? Because yes, minority of these farm attacks, they're extremely brutal and extremely racist, okay? South Africa is legislatively racist. It is, what is this word that the left-wingers like to use? It is institutionally a racist country that discriminates against minorities, and that minorities includes Indian people, that you people will hear a lot about very soon, because there's a lot of hatred for Indian people in South Africa, from top down, okay? Not person to person. For instance, provincially, Indian people marry into African tribes, and African tribes people marry into Indian families, and from an individual level, it's not like that. But institutionally, right? And from a politically black nationalist point of view, and from black nationalists themselves, they hate Indian people. And they've even removed statues of Gandhi. And Gandhi used to protest against apartheid. And this completely blew my mind. And when they started going after, for instance, the Gandhi statues, and they started trying to remove his name and stuff from certain buildings, the black nationalists now, they also attacked Indian people. And this isn't well reported on, but yeah, the South African government, the ruling party, the ANC, they've called mixed race people like myself dogs and animals. so yeah, their view, the Pan-African view of things, is psychopath, okay? They have a psychopathic view of humanity that is motivated by the delusion of this Pan-African society, okay? Like I've already started off, I think you've understand the gist of it, that black people aren't a monolith, okay? We have different tribes in South Africa. They have different life experiences, they have different prejudices, they have different things as individuals which they love and which they hate. And obviously they see black migrants as a greater threat to the economic status than native-born white people. So yeah, let me read this. None of us look like we should be in Holland. Yeah, very true, man. Like, even a lot of these white people that I know, right? They don't look like they belong in Holland. For instance, you know that colored people and Afrikaners, white Afrikaners, we are genetically related because obviously we have shared history. For instance, you have President de Klerk, who passed away. He's actually of Khoisan stock. Okay, so there's a Khoi tribe which which the colonizers from Holland interacted with when they landed, right? So a funny story with this, there was a man called Heri the Strandloper, okay? Ashamashao or something like that is his name, right? But anyway, they call him Heri the Strandloper. And Heri, the strand walker, or the Strandloper, he was taken by the Portuguese to Europe. And there he learned the language for about a year or two, and then they sent him back. After that, the Dutch came, okay? And so he was able to communicate with the Dutch, and they made deals and treaties. Now, his niece is actually the great ancestor of the de Klerk family. So a lot of these white Afrikaners that you see today, they have indigenous African ancestry, and they actually also intermarried a lot with the native tribes, and that's also how they got land. So there's many marriage contracts kept in museums between the Khoi and the San people and the Dutch people that landed here, even Scandinavians, right? Because Eva, who was the niece of Heri, the Strandloper, I like saying Strandloper, she married a Scandinavian guy. And I believe he was killed in Madagascar or something. He died there. She fell into depression. She was eventually arrested and put on Robben Island. Okay. She and many other women from these tribes married white people, white European settlers, and that is how they gained land. Okay. So it's not just the case of there's land, they're going to fight over it, and then they're going to take it, or there's vacant land. Sometimes land was obtained by marrying indigenous tribeswomen. So let's see. Not to worry, Clinton. All minorities can now apply for refugee program in USA. No, I think it's just the white Afrikaners, because Trump said there's a genocide going on apparently. And like I said, it's not a genocide, okay? I would relate it to being an ethnic cleansing because the population is being persecuted into not being here. Okay, so it's not just being slaughtered or anything like that. There's threats of slaughter, which is already a threat of ethnic cleansing and genocide, and so that falls under persecution. So are they right to take these white people as refugees? Yes, because if there are threats from the government, from people that's in parliament, parliamentarians, saying that they're going to slaughter that group, 100% that group should be taken as refugees. The best thing for the US to actually do is to create a safe zone in South Africa where they have UN troops like they did in Rwanda before that went hell. And then they could actually move there and they could actually have a community which is protected if they feel persecuted, okay? That would be the best thing to do, because you don't want to move people that are native to a country, that are citizens of a country, to another country, okay? They have the right by birth to be in South Africa, and that is where they should be, okay? Let's read more. Charles Hillary Clinton explained the xenophobia while we're on the subject. People need to know that hatred can extend to fellow Africans. Yes, I did talk about this, right? So African immigrants that come over to improve their living situation in South Africa, they arrived and they were largely successful because there are many programs and there are a lot of legislation, okay, to help black people in South Africa. And now, because they're coming over from another African country, they are the right skin tone, they can take advantage of the system, which is supposed to be meant to benefit the native population. And this causes a lot of animosity ethnically towards these immigrants from different countries, and then the local population would seek to attack them. There's been riots, there's been mobs burning down stores where they've harmed and slaughtered African migrants from other countries. And we call that the xenophobic attacks. It's sporadic attacks. It happens every now and then in South Africa. It's ongoing. So yeah, unfortunately, that's the way it is. And that doesn't align with the way that the Pan-Africans see African unity. Because they think just because you are dark-skinned, that you're supposed to be a brother and you're supposed to be together in something. No, ethnicity and race is far more complex than that, right? So that was completely destroyed. That notion of we're black and that's just going to unite us. No, that's a delusion, okay? People are more than just their skin color. And they are slowly, I think, realizing this. But another problem was the Europeans coming over that adopted our multicultural society, thinking it was a good and working system. And I saw a video by, what's his name now? Sargon of Akkad, okay? I believe it is Carl Benjamin, where he was talking about how we live in South Africa. And I think for the most part, he has a good take. He has a healthy take on South Africa. And then I saw Ernst Roosts, a South African content creator, not content creator, he's an activist for AfriForum, and now he's done this whole different program. And through the years, I've seen him feed sensationalism. But from his recent interviews, I will have to say that he's being very fair, okay? He's being very fair in his way that he's describing it, because obviously he's forced to be that way. Because if he messes up and he says something wrong, they will come for him. And the South African government even threatened citizens recently by saying they're going to charge us with high treason. So they're threatening to charge people talking about these farm attacks and this situation in South Africa with high treason. And luckily I live in a different country in Asia, so I'm completely safe now. Okay, moving on. Explain, do you not think that most Safa suffer with PTSD? Yes, I actually do. Because every person I know has been a victim of violent crime in South Africa. And so it's gotten to a point where if you are attacked, it's expected, right? And it really messes with your mind. When I landed in Philippines is a much poorer country than South Africa, okay? When I landed here, I was very sus, okay? I was suspect of everything. I had a level of suspicion of every person that I dealt with, especially the poor people. But culturally, they are superior to South Africans, culturally, okay? Because regardless of how much more wealth we have, or GDP per capita, right? We have a much higher GDP per capita than Philippines. Our GDP in general, our country's wealth, is far greater than that of Philippines. But the behavior and culture and the way that the Filipinos treat foreigners even, right, is so much better than the way that we treat each other. And this is, I think, caused largely by politics in South Africa and the constant fear-mongering with or race pandering and racial discrimination that comes from top down, from the government to the people. So Philippines culturally, because they are more alike to one another, they don't really deal with that. There is tribal issues that people have. Some people view their own tribal group as being superior to a different tribal group, or being better looking, or being more intelligent, or being better spoken. But that's just, it's not to the same level as what we have in South Africa, where a different tribal group, for instance, they slaughtered a different tribe, and now that hatred 200 years later is still found, you know, it's trickled its way down, and it's led to a degree of prejudice that people may have, okay? Many people despise the Zulu people in South Africa, and I love the Zulu people. From white to black in South Africa, right? To mixed race people, Asians and everything. What they say about, for instance, Zulu women and Zulu men is they have a lot of confidence. The women are very humble. The women are well behaved. They are loving, and there's a lot of good things that is said about them. And I think this is just to do with the historic confidence in South Africa, right? The Zulu woman and the Zulu people, like I said before in my little rant, okay? They have a degree of confidence that help them overcome whatever insecurities they may have. I've known poor Zulu people, I've known rich Zulu people, I've known short Zulu guys, I've known tall, muscular, giant Zulu guys. They have a degree of confidence and a surety, self-assurance, that I just don't see among other groups, even white people and colored people, right? I don't see that level of confidence amongst them. And this is because the Zulus have a beautiful story that they can tell to themselves, right? To give them that degree of confidence. They are warriors. They dominated South Africa. And that is, I think, the source of this self-assurance. And maybe that's what people need. They need a positive story to tell themselves. As South Africa, we had a beautiful story to tell ourselves during the 90s. We are a rainbow nation. We are united in our goals, and we are united in being non-racial and non-racial society. That was a lie, but it was a beautiful lie, and it led to me growing up in a relatively peaceful country. Okay, let's see. Ernst Rich has started the pioneer movement. He has to still elaborate this approach. 100% agreed. A lot of people are turned off by Ernst Rich, even other Afrikaners in South Africa, because he's often viewed as being a racist or something like that, which is probably uncalled for, and a sensationalist, which maybe historically there was a lot of sensationalism, but obviously this is obviously being a sensationalist during a time where you feel your ethnic group is being persecuted makes sense, okay? Because you really want people to take it seriously. And I think that's a lot of issues that people have with him. I've seen his recent work, and his recent stuff is far more honest, and it can appeal to a larger group of people if he actually doesn't just say it's persecution or discrimination against white Afrikaners, okay? Because South Africa has legislation that discriminates against all minorities. Mixed race people of black ancestry are discriminated against for not being black enough, legislatively. And it affects our jobs, it affects our livelihood, it affects our access to education. So we need to do away with this. We need to have a system which deals with people's social economic status, okay? So if we had laws that didn't discriminate based on race, and we just had laws to help people of lower social status or economic status, things would be so much better. But unfortunately, what we have is psychopaths and communists with delusions and too much power, and eventually they will be replaced, okay? They will be replaced, God willing. And people that will come to power, the younger generation, that have more rational understanding of what it is to be South African, they will lead us to a better direction, okay? And we are seeing this, or we did see it at least with the ANC losing the majority of votes in South Africa. They were taken down from being 2/3 majority, okay, to just having slightly above 40% of the vote in South Africa. So people are tired of that nonsense. They don't want the land to be forcefully taken from white citizens and redistributed in a communist agenda, okay? It doesn't sort the majority of the people out. It doesn't improve their living situation. It will be far worse for them. And obviously you get a minority of people that think, okay, I'm gonna slight the white people. I want the white people to suffer like I'm suffering. As a person who grew up poor, okay, and with a lot of anger in my own heart, I understand that, okay? But that is the minority view, and that hatred will die off, okay? As long as you can give the people what they need. If the people are fed, if the people are educated, if they see that their children have a future, guess what? They're not going to have that amount of anger towards their fellow man, okay? Charles van Oosten, okay. The Zulus are a very aggressive tribe. Well, Okay. People would say that colored people are a very aggressive people, and that's my people. Okay. We have high crime statistics. We have high, what do you call this, domestic abuse and all this other stuff, right, that we're dealing with. But this is because in the Western Cape, where most of us is from, we actually were over 80% of the demographics. Okay, so demographically, over 80% of the Western province where we are from, the majority of us, was colored. And then what happened was, when apartheid ended, because there were a lot of opportunities in the Western Cape, many people from other provinces, black people and many migrants, moved over to the Western Cape to seek work. And obviously this has led to us being now around about 40% demographically. And where we were before, during the 90s, when we were above 80%, that is actually when we should have pushed for secession from South Africa, where we should have been an independent nation state of the Western Cape, or whatever you want to call it. But now that is a pipe dream. I see many political parties pushing for an independent Western Cape. You don't have the will to do that. You don't have the motivation. You don't have the balls, okay, to move towards secession, because it's a pipe dream. Okay, it's the same thing with this race baiting that we see from the political parties. People want a better life, and so if people see their way of life being threatened, especially the minorities, right, because Western Cape is the largest minority, is my ethnic group, and then you have a large population of white people, and then you have black people, you have black immigrants and all this other stuff, right? So even the black immigrants, they are for the idea of secession from the rest of South Africa, because it would benefit them. And unfortunately, that is a pipe dream. It's not going to happen. Okay, let's see. Yeah, 1 of 44. Okay, I don't understand that. Only when they drink. Yeah, KZN will get independence before Western Cape. Very true. Very true. This is because Zulu people are united. They have a good story. They have unity historically. They have one chief, one king that governs over them, right? Well, those that actually fall into that system, right? They have a monarchy, and unlike, for instance, other tribes like the Xhosas, they have many kings, they have many chiefs, and that you could easily go to some of them and bribe them, and this would cause disunity, right? This would cause them to hold a lot of diverse views. They wouldn't be as such a monolith as the Zulu people, for instance. So the Zulus, because they have a clear monarch, okay, they have one chief, one paramount chief that rules over them. They are more likely to unite and to actually have an independent nation state than the rest of South Africa. And I would actually move to their nation state, then I wouldn't remain in what is left of South Africa, right? I would actually move to the independent nation state of KZN, because I know culturally they have better behavior than many other South Africans due to having a better story and being more united. Let's see. Where's my manners? Greetings, 1 of 44. I'm just going to finish my coffee and I'm going to call it a day. If you have any questions, as extreme as your questions are, we are already 50 minutes in. The YouTube algorithm isn't going to catch me now. Ask me these questions and I will answer you in a very fair way. I will gather my thoughts and try to be articulate. You've seen me rant through this whole live stream. But yeah, if you have questions, ask away. I am very knowledgeable about the interactions between different groups in South Africa and the opinions that they hold, because I was not racially persecuted. I was a victim of racism from black people. I was a victim of racism from white people. I was a victim of racism from my own people, okay? And from Chinese people that came to visit South Africa. So I'm a complete victim. Ask me any question that you like. I live in KZN. Yes. How is it in KZN? Is it actually, do you find it's better than Western Cape, for instance? We are all, yes. People in, for instance, when I grew up, right, because my stepfather is a white man and he's been in my life for a few decades. I've interacted with a lot of his wealthier friends and his poorer friends, right? And oftentimes I see the way that rich white people treat poorer white people, and it's crazy, man. It's vicious, right? It's evil the way that people treat people based on social status sometimes, and I often try to not hold myself accountable. Before I engage with somebody, I try to have the right mindset, okay? I don't try to look at how they're dressed. I don't try to look at them based on social status or anything like that. I want to look at them as another human being, as my brother, okay, in humanity. That is how I want to look at them, right? But it's very difficult sometimes to do that, and I think we should all do that. Let's see, more violent, except maybe compared to Cape Flats. Yeah, my bro, 100%. Okay, in die Cape Flats, ruk het my bro, die ding is die mekaar daar, al wat ek kan sê, okay? We're gonna switch over to Afrikaans now, okay? Yeah, Cape Afrikaans gaan ons nou praat, my bro. Okay, so, any questions? And I will stay online for another 5 to 10 minutes to answer any question. Again, as julle enige vrae vra vir my asseblief. Ek is van Suid-Afrika, ek bly in Philippines, okay? So ja, julle kan vir my vra. Ek sal probeer om Afrikaans te praat saam met julle, and ja, ons sien hoe het gaan. Ons sien hoe het gaan. The old style Zulu was always very respectful and vice versa. Yeah, but that is how it is, bro. Even amongst the youth that I've engaged with, that is their view. I've seen more issues that Zulu people have had with other tribes than what they've had with white people. And funny enough, okay? The old style Zulu, even other tribes, right? That I'm not going to name them. Even other tribes that I've engaged with, people from different tribes, black people, they have a lot of issues with Zulu people. And I just see this as envy, okay? So yeah. The old style Zulu was always very, yes. Okay, like I said, I'm going to be online for another 5 minutes. I think I'll actually read some statistics in South Africa to end the show with. Okay, let's see. What can I see online? It's actually very nice to do these live streams sometimes because I can get a lot of my thoughts out there. I know I rant and sometimes I make incoherent statements, okay? But please understand that I'm not speaking with people that are first language English speakers, yeah, okay? So my way of speaking is very simple these days, and so I should actually read more so that I can articulate myself better, and I think I'll actually start doing that. I'm very comfortable now doing these live streams, so I think I can do it every now and then. So okay, we're going to talk about South African farmer tax now. I'm going to read some stats, and I'm going to read some opinions from the internet on this. The source I'm going to read, I already read it before, like a while back, and it is kind of biased because they don't mention the racially motivated attacks which do take place during farm attacks. Obviously, the minority of these farm attacks are racially motivated. Jay reacts. Greetings, Jay. Okay, let me see if I have any. Okay, old Salzu. The unemployment rate within RSA is the real killer. Crime is rife because of it, in my opinion. Yeah, it's unemployment, but it's also culture, right? Because if we are raising kids, well, we have top-down religious discrimination from the elite in our society and from the government, okay? And they have their people all over the place. They have their people in the legislative branch all over, and that, it obviously feeds an ongoing level of prejudice that people have, okay? I think the majority of people, especially impoverished people, they want work. And that's what we saw during the last elections in 2024, when the ANC dropped to about 40% of the vote. They used to hold 2/3 majority. South Africans are done with them. They don't want the ANC anymore. They don't want this promise of land expropriation without compensation. They want work. They want the capability to buy their own land. They want the ability to feed their children, and that's, I think, the priority a lot of them have. I'm going to read my comments, then I'm going to read the source, and I'll give my opinions on it in relation to the farm attacks. Okay, the unemployment rate in South Africa is the killer. Yeah. Hey Clinton, hi. Jerry X again. We used to go skate in Grassy Park. Away Grassy Park, me bro. White, colored, and black. Now it is almost impossible for such interactions. Yeah, the crime rate is crazy. Unemployment figures came out yesterday. 32% officially, much higher in reality. No, I completely agree. It's like the inflation, right? You know that they lie about inflation very often, right? For instance, how do they measure this again? So a lot of products, they wouldn't. So if a product increases in price, right, they actually go to the alternative of that product, and that is how they calculate the inflation. So they lie on inflation. Inflation is usually twice of what they are reporting. It's Jared from Cape Town. Oh, Jared, how's it going, man? J reacts. I hope you're doing well. I saw you were in the hospital recently, man. Like, not recently, a few weeks back. And my wife was very concerned about you. I hope you're doing well. Charles Fun was listen. True. The higher ups enable the action of the many. Completely true. The higher, look, it's just a culture. Okay, those in power, to get into power, usually you would have to imitate those in power. And so what we see, for instance, with the ANC Youth League, they want to adopt the view held historically by the ANC, right? And so then they would have to continue with that rhetoric and mindset. Even though personally those people are very wealthy, they have a completely different lifestyle. This is what they would have to repeat to gain prominence within the ANC. Okay, and then other people see that, they think, okay, this is still what we're believing, let's continue on with this. But it's complete delusion, it's a complete fake. I'm good, my guy. Okay, how is the Pokemon Go going? Because my wife is actually going to Thailand to go play Pokemon Go. She went to Singapore, she's going to Thailand now, Taiwan, sorry, to play Pokemon Go. And hopefully next year we can go to Japan. Okay, because I'm looking forward to going to Japan, but unfortunately I'm too busy to apply for a visa now to go into Taiwan. So she will be going on holiday in Taiwan to go catch them all. Okay, so yeah, it's quite hectic how serious people take Pokemon Go. I haven't played myself in a very long time. Okay, let's see. So we're going to be talking about some farm attacks in South Africa. I'm going to be giving my feedback. Goodness. The simplest way to understand the hierarchy in RSA is to liken it to feudalism. Yes, sometimes, yes, because did you know that the government, right, takes tax money and they pay, and they, sorry, it's not pay, they bribe the chiefs with the money of the citizens, right? And then that chief will go to their community and they'll tell the community, no, we're going to vote ANC or we're going to vote for this. And so obviously it is a type of system of feudalism. With Jacob Zuma, he's a monarchist, okay? So he was a Zulu, the previous president Jacob Zuma, and he would often be promoting the Zulu people and so forth. But yeah, it is, you could actually say there's a large feudal influence in the way that we operate in South Africa. Why a farmer? Goodness, I want to read a source, but I'm going to actually just reply to your comments, Charles. Okay. Why are farm attacks not reported by the media? This is because I think in 2000s or late 2000s, right, 2007, 2008, they actually, to hide the statistics of these farm attacks, they would lump them in with just normal homicide. Okay, so my view again on farm attacks, the minority of farm attacks are racially motivated. They are very brutal. It's the minority. It's just opportunistic to go to an isolated farm and to go rob them or to take what you want from those people. Okay, it's very hard for police to get there. Private security is very expensive. It's an opportunistic attack, and a minority of those opportunistic attacks are racially motivated. There is no way to say it is not racially motivated with the level of brutality and the rhetoric that the attackers sometimes use towards their victims. Okay, let's see. The simplest word, what are kind like King Jacob Zuma? Yes, Jacob Zuma used $250 million in South Africa to renovate his home, okay, in Nkandla. And this was a major issue. And so even the EFF, who also have corrupt leaders that have stolen money and been involved in scandals, okay, allegedly, they have been chanting pay back the money. That was actually how they gained a lot of votes. It wasn't just the racist rhetoric that they used. It was holding Jacob Zuma accountable. And now many of them have moved over to Jacob Zuma's party, even though they've acknowledged how corrupt that person is. It's just completely crazy. Yes, VBS Bank and the fire pool. Yes, goodness. I'm going to read this stuff now, Charles, okay? South Africa. Oh, goodness, I should actually be serious when I read this. You've got me laughing. Just hold on. Okay, this is severe. So I'm going to talk about this before taking a look at my comments. South African farm attacks. South Africa farm attacks of plaasaanvalle or plaasmoorde are violent crimes, including assault, murder, rape, and robbery that take place on farms in South Africa. The attacks target both white and black farmers. Completely true. Okay? The term, it's also colored people that are often employed on the farms as workers. Okay? The term has no formal legal definition, but such attacks have been the subject of discussion by media and public figures in South Africa and abroad. Claims that such attacks on farmers disproportionately targets whites are key elements of the white genocide conspiracy theory. Okay, so here's a very important part, right? This is why even I don't say it's a genocide, because there isn't a severe level of casualties from the rhetoric being used and from the incitement that we see from the parliamentarians like Julius Malema, right? You could say it's ethnic cleansing because they are trying to get rid of a certain ethnic group and they're using violent rhetoric to do it. And through the years, the population has been going down. So ethnic cleansing, yes. Genocide, no. Okay. Threats of genocide, yes. Okay. And have become a common talking point among white nationalists worldwide. So you can see this article is already taking a more left-wing view of things, right? However, due to the lack of comprehensive data on the racial composition of farm households, it is unclear whether white farmers are being targeted in particular or if they face disproportionate risk of being killed. Now, after a rally, okay, after an EFF rally or after an ANC Youth League rally, there's actually a spike up in farm attacks. And as I already said, some of those farm attacks are racially motivated and they chant slogans from those rallies at the people they are attacking. Okay. However, due to the lack of comprehensive data on the racial composition of farm households, it is unclear whether white farmers are being targeted in particular or if they face a disproportionate risk of being killed. So, yes, it's disproportionate because it is racially motivated. And obviously, it's still a minority of attacks, so it is different to the other types of attacks happening on the farms because it has that element to it. The government of South Africa and other analysts say that farm attacks are part of a broader crime problem. So this is where they actually, Charles, if you pay attention here, right? This is where they hid these farm attacks because they included it in the broader crime rate, okay, the homicides. And so people didn't really notice it, okay, the public or even goodness, media, okay, South African media didn't report widely on it a few decades ago because they ignored it as they said, oh no, the crime rate in South Africa is just high, which it is, but those farm attack rates are much higher than even the crime rate in South Africa. The crime rate in South Africa is crazy. Okay, terminology and definition. South Africa statutory law does not define a farm attack as a specific crime. Again, here they acknowledge that it's not being defined as something which is unique. Rather, the term is used to refer to a number of different crimes committed against persons, specifically on commercial farms or small holdings. According to South African Police Service, SAPS, National Operational Coordinating Committee. So I'm going to quote them. Attacks on farms and small holdings refer to attacks aimed on the persons of residents, workers, and visitors to the farms and small holdings, whether with the intent to murder, rape, rob, inflict bodily harm, etc. Right? In addition, all actions aimed at disrupting farming activities are a commercial concern, whether for motives related to ideology, labor, disputes, land issues, revenge, grievances, intimidation should be included. Wait, let's just read this part again. All actions at disrupting farming activities as a commercial concern, whether for motives related to ideology, which could include racism, labor disputes, land issues, revenge, again, racial element to it, it could also be included there. Grievances, again, could have racial element. Intimidation, it should be included. Okay, this definition excludes social fabric crimes, that is those crimes committed by members of the farming community on one another. So farmers attacking farmers is not included in the statistics, such as domestic or workplace violence, and focuses on outsiders or invaders entering the farm to commit specific criminal acts. Dina Pule, the safety and security member of executive councils of Mpumalanga province, has disagreed with the definition and has said that farm attacks included only those cases where farm residents were murdered and not cases of robberies or attempted murders. Okay, that is actually a better way to put it, right? Because murder should be separate than robberies. So again, in these violent attacks, often people are obviously murdered, and then there's a lot of robberies. So I would say there's more robberies happening on the farms than murders. And so obviously there should be a unique level of concern when in regards to murders. Okay, we'll continue reading on. Definition: farm attacks. Human Rights Watch has criticized the use of the term farm attacks, which they regard as suggesting a terror or military purpose. Well, here's the issue, right? Because technically it is a militant issue, okay? Because that is what you could call people which go to a rally, okay, and get incited there by that rally to commit violence. That is militants, and that is a form of terrorism, okay? If their goal after that rally is to harm people based on their race, and the rhetoric used at that rally was racist rhetoric, it would be a militant or a terrorist action, okay, which they do not believe is the primary motivation. Okay, it's not the primary motivation of most farm attacks, I completely agree. Findings: the phenomenon and the extent to which it is politicized has been the focus of a number of investigations. In 2003, report of the Special Committee of Inquiry into Farm Attacks by the SA Police found that most incidents were driven by a desire for material gain, and very few cases have political overtones. So technically they are admitting here that some of these attacks have political overtones. Again, some of these attackers that attack a minority of, then in a minority of these cases, that go out to these farms and have a racial element to them, they are chanting slogans from rallies that they hear, okay? So, motives. According to the South African government, the chief motives for attacks is robbery. Completely agree. A committee of the inquiry into farm attacks was appointed in 2001 by the National Commissioner of Police. So here's another issue. The National Commissioner of Police is an ANC deployee, okay? So he has strong affiliation with the ANC, and he will have the same mindset as the ANC members, the communists and the Pan-Africanists. You would have that same mindset, and obviously that would impact his duties and his job, especially during 2001, okay? The purpose of the committee was to inquire into the ongoing spate of farm attacks on farms, which include violent criminal acts such as murder, robbery, rape, to determine the motives and factors behind these attacks and make a recommendation on the findings. Monetary theft occurred in most of the attacks. So most of the attacks, as we can see, is robbery, because people want to, they want to obviously get money from these attacks. So robbery in an impoverished country makes complete sense. Let me just check some of these comments. Okay, Firepool. When does genocide actually start? When does genocide actually start? During the 1930s, they didn't know either. Look at how that ended. Okay, so genocide is when a large-scale attack happened and many people lose their lives. Okay, so that would be called genocide. What we haven't seen here is a large-scale slaughter of that particular ethnic group. And so obviously we can't say it's a genocide because it just doesn't meet the definition. And even when it is a genocide, people debate. Okay, look at, for instance, the Holocaust, right? The Holocaust. Goodness, I'm going to get slaughtered for that if YouTube catches me. So in the 1940s, what happened to the Jewish community in Germany? That is a genocide, clearly, because millions and millions of Jewish people were murdered due to their ethnicity. And so we haven't seen something like that, right? In South Africa, there was also the Holodomor, which happened in the Soviet Union, where I believe Ukrainian farmers, they were also, the Soviet Union took away their food and they were basically killing them off. Okay, that is also a genocide. It's also not very talked about, and that is what communists also do. Funny enough, they targeted the farmers, and that is the purpose. That is what these people are doing, because they are communists. That is their mindset. So they go after the farmers. So yeah, let's see what this says. When it's genocide, do they mention the success rate of cases of farm attacks? I'm thinking it's probably the lowest out of any crime. Do they mention the success rate of cases of farm attacks? Goodness. Oh, so the investigations. Look, a lot of these farms, and I've been to quite a few farms, right? I have many Afrikaner friends back in South Africa. I used to go party with these people, drink and do all kinds of things, right? And there was always lots of cameras. And so if the will is there to catch the criminals, there would be enough evidence, in my opinion, to catch them. So I think, yeah, they probably have a high prosecution rate. Not prosecution rate, they would catch these people quite easily due to all the cameras in the homes. Okay. Johan Berger, a senior researcher at the Institute of Security Studies, ISS, has said the attacks were typically motivated not by race but by greed. Completely agree. The South African Police Services, the SAPS, declared in 1998 that there had been no evidence at the time of systemic organized attacks. That's a lie. Okay, so even if it's the minority of cases, it can still be organized systemically, and that comes from the rallies. Okay, all of these rallies need to be thoroughly investigated, and thankfully we have a lot of video footage from these rallies so that we can investigate what was said exactly. And what the Western media is seeing right now, when they see Julius Malema chant, kill the Boer and shoot to kill and all this stuff, right, is exactly what we saw when a lot of these attackers go to the homes of people, okay, and they attack them based on race. They are chanting that stuff, okay, outside of the homes before the attacks. So imagine now you're at your home, it's isolated, there's not another home 4 kilometers away or miles away. And now all you hear outside is, shoot to kill the farmer. Now you're hearing that, right outside of your home. Is that a racially motivated attack that's going to happen? Yes, it's racially motivated. And where does it come from? From the rallies. All of these people, the event organizers, the parliamentarians, all of these people need to go to prison. Okay, let's get further on here. Let's see. Statistics. Okay, so here we can see all the statistics. So I'm just going to read the statistics first before I read their notes. In the year of 2010, there was 115 farm attacks and 64 murders. Okay, so let's say 10% of these farm attacks are racially motivated attacks. So we could say maybe 64 of these people, or 6.4 of them, were attacked. The attacks were racially motivated, the murders were racially motivated. I think that would be fair, okay? Because even this article from these people being quoted, it says the minority of cases, but now we don't have actual statistics on the percentage of which of these crimes are racially motivated because the government didn't do that investigation. We can only speculate, and my speculation is about 10%, okay? And then in 2011, so let's go to a voting year, okay? Let me just bring up the elections quickly, and then I'm going to tell you when I see spikes. So, past 30 years. Years, okay. So I just want to see if there's spikes during a voting year, because that's normally when they rally. Okay. Okay. In 1999, okay. The statistics go back to 2010. Okay, so in 2014, let's see if we see this. Oh, crap. Okay. Okay. So 2014 was a voting year. Okay. So I'm going to read from 2010 to 2014. In 2010, 115 farm attacks. In 2011, not a voting year, far away from voting, 96 attacks. 2013, it's getting to the voting year, right? 231 attacks. 2014, the voting year, 277 attacks. Okay, so we see as it leads up to these elections, due to those rallies, we see spikes. Okay, so they need to go investigate these rallies. They need to go investigate the organizers and the parliamentarians, and they need to arrest them all, because clearly, even from this, right, we can see that there are spikes in farm attacks every election year and leading up to that election year. Okay, so the year before the election and the year after the election. So we can see clearly there is there's something going on, and the thing that's going on, everybody around the world is seeing it. They're seeing the calls for killing the white Afrikaners. Okay, and obviously that leads to more farm attacks. So let's read here. 1930s. This is targeted persecution. Even Searle said himself, it's the same as boiling a frog slowly. Well, I think he said that in the 1990s, right? So that's when he wasn't president and he didn't hold power. He was just taking over all the McDonald's in South Africa at that time. Yes, Cyril Ramaphosa, the president, owned the vast majority of the McDonald's franchises in the country at one point. How he got that, and how he got the money to buy it, no one knows, okay? But he got it, okay? The government doesn't recognize that, though. Well, it doesn't matter what the government recognizes, okay? Because the international community, due to the activism of Ernst Roots, is well aware of it. And so now it's going to impact them financially, okay? So think about it this way. The politicians in South Africa, they're in that job to get rich, okay? If you're going to impact their money, they are going to cry about it. They are going to feel it, because they don't want the economy to go balls up in South Africa, okay? They want to steal for decades to come. And so they will cave to international pressure, same as the apartheid regime, right? The apartheid regime caved to international pressure because it was impacting the economy, okay? And so they needed to resolve the issue. Otherwise, South Africa was also going to go to, we were going to have hyperinflation, okay? Because we were mainly an export country. We couldn't export anymore during apartheid because other countries didn't want to have dealings with us. They couldn't even compete in Olympics, okay? Because we were banned from that due to being a racist country. So that degree of international pressure that was put on the apartheid regime will also impact the new South Africa under the ANC. Okay, let's see this targeted persecution. That's SAPS or Solidarity. No, this is from SAPS. This is all SAPS stats. But obviously they won't say, they'll just say, okay, this was a tax on farms. Shaw said, yeah, I believe so. If you can't label people singing about inciting violence, hate, and in hate speech in a democracy, and the courts turning a blind eye, I don't think there is hope. Well, let's think about it this way. As I said already, the people in the legislative branch, right? The people controlling the laws of country, they are mainly employees from the ANC. Okay, they're enriching themselves. They have a lot of nepo babies to feed. And so what's going to happen is, guess what? They are going to want to change things so that they can continue to enrich themselves for decades to come. That is just how it is. And so they would cave to international pressure. But obviously it has failed doing so in our country itself because they hold too much power. They don't care if it's within our own country, but they do care about international pressure. And that's where Ernst Roots really he took him out, okay? Say what you want about that guy. He really, I think he's been doing it almost for 2 decades now. He's been going to countries all over the world. Initially, people just ignored him. But right now, that man is all over the place. I've seen him on Tim Pool's show. I've seen him on Tucker Carlson. He's getting really out there. And now it's actually, if you think about a pendulum, right? So people were ignoring him, people were ignoring him, people were ignoring him. And now everybody is aware of it, okay? So that degree of international pressure which is coming to South Africa, it's going to force a lot of these people that are deployees or cadre members of the ANC, okay? They will maintain their privilege, okay? Let's just think about this. They want to maintain their wealth. And where are they going to go? They would be, if for instance this becomes a major thing internationally, which it is right now, right? Imagine now that family member of somebody that is politically affiliated or a member of the ANC who's been stealing from the country for years, that person goes overseas. That person fears being outed, okay? Because of their family's ties to corruption. So they will feel it. They will feel that international pressure. But locally, they're like kings. It's like a feudal system, like you said, Charles. Here, we can't touch them. But internationally, they have a lot of, they're going to really feel that one. If you can't label people singing about inciting violence, yeah. I think I'm going to end this now. Thank you guys so much for watching and sticking with me while I'm having my cold cup of coffee. I ranted like for 90% of this, and I hope it was beneficial to all of you and you guys got a lot of whatever questions you had out. So yeah, let's see. Thanks for entertaining my questions. Contact anytime, bro. You can also find me on X at BaronZA. You can find me on YouTube on this channel, okay? I also make Christian content or Christian Catholic content as Pope Defenders, also on YouTube. So you guys can check me out there. Peace.